I'll start this video by thanking you, my viewer, and the information it's as good as the number of people it can reach. An excellent book in the library, which nobody ever reads, is as useless as a man's bra. Therefore, if you have learned anything from my previous series, please consider sharing with others. Let's pass the knowledge. This is episode 2 where I'll continue discussing the dollar. In the previous episodes, we saw that before World War II, the cross-border transactions were concluded by use of bricks of gold, a system known as the gold standard. During the war, President Roosevelt obtained permission from the Congress to make it illegal for ordinary citizens to own gold above a certain weight. Americans had to surrender their gold to the government, and it was that gold and the war bonds that stabilized American economy during World War II. We saw that banks protected themselves from collapsing by forming a central bank, and every bank has a board member in the central bank. In the central bank's board of directors, but the chairman of the board, that is the central bank governor, is normally appointed by the president. The same concept applies to the IMF, whereby IMF is like the world central bank. Countries or group of countries have a board of director member in the IMF. So because World War II wrecked most economies of the countries in the world except the United States, the Allies had to crown the dollar as the big boy in the bloc, hoping that the United States will hold on to the exceptional monetary policies that kept its economy rock solid throughout the war. So all the central banks of the world shipped their gold to the United States in exchange for the dollar. This gold is currently held in New York Federal Reserve and in Fort Knox, Kentucky. And this was now the so-called the New World Order. Therefore, if you ever come to New York, stop by the Federal Reserve and tell them you came to pick up your gold. The Americans, after realizing how much economic power they have over the rest of the world by having their gold, they started running budget deficits by printing dollars and funding projects like the Great Society under President Lyndon Johnson, fighting war in Vietnam, as well as funding the manned mission to the moon. Remember the Apollo mission to the moon. So other countries noticed Americans were printing more dollars than they had the gold to back it. They started dumping the dollars and demanded the physical delivery of their gold. So to keep the gold of the world in the American vault, President Nixon called an emergency halt of the gold convertibility system, effectively severing all the link between the dollar and the gold. Therefore, the United States government could print as much money as they wanted, since they were not limited by the amount of gold they own, leading to inflation. So why do we still use the dollar, you may ask? Well, the United States is still holding all the gold of the central banks of the world, except a few countries like North Korea and Cuba, which did not join the so-called the New World Order. So if you decide to go back to the gold as a means of international trade, the United States still wins. It has your gold. It is also very hard to get all the countries of the world to agree on dumping the dollar at once, since there is no viable alternative. That is why a barrel of oil is still priced in dollars, and since the dollar is the most valued currency in the world, a lot of people would love to come to the United States. I know you might be wondering, how does all this affect you as a Kenyan? Kenya and the rest of the world uses dollar as a means of cross-border transaction, and since our manufacturing capabilities are limited, they are still limited, so we depend on imports, and this means we must have dollars in the reserve to conclude any cross-border transaction. And if the United States have a problem with the Kenyan government, they just turn off the avenues that bring the dollar into the country. And this can be achieved by issuing sanctions where other countries are warned against doing business with Kenya. And they will ask, for example, they can also ask Europe to start buying tea from India and coffee from Ethiopia. Then they will issue like a travel advisories advising Americans not to visit Kenya, and this in turn causes the scarcity of the dollars, and it makes importing stuff like petroleum impossible. And when the available reserve starts running out, and the price of everything starts going up. So in the next video, we will see what challenges the dollar have faced over the years, and we will also see about the sanctions and why Saddam and Gaddafi were removed from power. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.